Bud Grant knew what he was doing when he picked up a guy like that, and I think that he was just one of the stalwarts with the football club there, and certainly one of the great players ever to play in this league.
Fans expected another exciting battle when they poured into Toronto for the Bombers Ticats Grey Cup in 1962. Instead, they got what came to be known as the greatest game we never saw, the Fog Bowl.
ABC was going to televise the game in the States for the first time, prime time national television. Now, the advantage to that was, of course, exposure, which helps in our recruiting of players. And I thought, well, this is going to be great. Then the fog comes in.
It soon became a game of running plays. Passes and punts went up and disappeared. Finally, with less than 10 minutes to go and the Bombers up by 1, Commissioner Sid Halter called a timeout.
We went into the dressing room, sat there working on strategy of what we were going to call and what we were going to do, and we came back on the field only to find out they came in and said the game had been called. Too much fog, they were going to come back the next morning.
We had from then until the next day to call the next play. It's the longest I ever had to think about a play. We had a meeting that night, we had a meeting in the morning, we had a meeting in the locker room, and we come out in the field, warmed up, and got ready to call the play. I still wasn't sure what we were going to run.
It was tough. After playing a full season and almost a full game the day before, to play the next morning, to put tape back on to your raw skin and try to get stretched back out from the Charlie horses and the contact if you had the previous day. There were a number of players that couldn't even suit up.
They need never have bothered to finish the game. When the teams returned to the field, no points were scored, and the Bombers hoisted their 4th Grey Cup in 5 years. In 1965, the Ticats got a chance for revenge as Toronto hosted a windblown Grey Cup that would leave Bomber fans second-guessing Bud Grant.
If you've ever been in that stadium, you know in Toronto that the wind howls down there, and to throw the ball against the wind or to kick the ball was almost an impossible endeavor.
Facing the strong winds, punting proved futile. 3 times when the Bombers found themselves pinned deep in their own zone, Grant elected to concede a 2-point safety touch in order to retain possession of the ball.
Bud Grant made very, very few bad decisions as far as I was concerned during the 9 years that I played under him, and certainly giving up those safety touches in no way was incorrect. We just couldn't move the ball, and Hamilton couldn't either, but we lost by those 6 points.
While the Winnipeg Blue Bombers struggled through much of the 70s, the team did find their share of stars. 1974 saw the arrival of a quarterback who could throw like none other, Ralph Dieter Brock.
When I talk about my favorite Blue Bombers, I have to start with Dieter Brock, Ralph Dieter Brock. I'm a lover of pure passers in football. He was your classic drop-back quarterback. I loved watching Dieter Brock throw the football because he threw it unlike anybody that I've seen in the CFL.
While Brock made headlines, there was little fanfare in 1980 when an unheralded kicker arrived for training camp. Based on his track record, no one could have guessed that Bob Cameron would be on the roster for the next 2 decades.
I was drafted in the 1st round by Edmonton, and I thought, geez, I'm just going to be able to make the next step to the pros, and that'll be it, and I'll have a long career. And I got to Edmonton, and 1st round pick, and it was the first cut. And so it went from there to Calgary Stampeders, tried out there, was cut again. In 1978, tried out for Philadelphia Eagles, was cut there. Went to Ottawa Rough Riders, was cut there. Hamilton Ticats, cut there. Back to university for one last year. And then I tried out for Buffalo Bills the next year. Cut again. And basically I thought my career was over until Winnipeg phoned me in the fall of '79 and asked me if they wanted to come out in the spring. And it was sort of embarrassing when you've tried out that many times and never even played it down until your 4th year of trying out. But I wasn't willing to give it up.
Successful football teams need both character and characters. The Bombers found both in one hulking package, the unfriendly giant, Chris Walby.
Chris Walby should have been a defensive player. And the reason why I say that is because defensive people have attitude. They're You're supposed to have attitude. You're supposed to be nasty and have a nasty attitude. And Chris Walby was the only offensive lineman I had seen in my playing time and in my coaching time that has an attitude like that. I mean, like, he used to be downright nasty and mean.
Every week, you have to peak at a certain time and turn ultra aggressive to basically look to destroy and maim the player you're playing against and knock the snot out of somebody across from me. You know, and that was what I lived for.
In 1983, quarterback Dieter Brock staged a one-man strike in an attempt to get his release to play in the United States. Instead, the Bombers sent him east, to Hamilton, in a swap for quarterback Tom Clements.
Tom had the ability to really use his weapons, and that means handing the ball off, dump passes, little screen passes, misdirection, and what Tommy could really do well was surgically take you apart.
I've never played with a guy that was who I thought had such a grasp of the game as Tom Clements. He was a surgeon on the football field. He just could do so many things, and he had defenses just reeling. They didn't know if it was going to be a run, a pass, play action, a side out, a hitch pass. He just did everything he had to do.
The trade set up a storybook 1984 Grey Cup. The Ticats and Brock versus the Bombers and Clements. But it was no contest. Winnipeg's defense mauled their ex-teammate, and the Bombers ran away with the game 47-17.
Winning the Grey Cup, grabbing a hold of that thing, for a Canadian kid, this is the pinnacle. I mean, for me as a football player, you can't imagine how, even though I think I was 30 years old at the time, this was something I dreamed of my whole life.
It was such a wonderful, wonderful, unbelievable feeling. This is something that everybody plays for. And to be able to hold it, and knowing that on those little silver-plated name tags of the teams, where every player on that team is etched in that thing for life, we were going to be there. I was going to be a piece of this traveling showcase. It was unbelievable. It was just the greatest feeling in the world.
In 1987, the Montreal Alouettes folded, and the league needed to realign the conferences. Winnipeg was suddenly an Eastern city.
Everything we did was Western Conference. I mean, all our rivalries were Western Conference. We were losing all that. You know, there was Edmonton and Calgary, and then we had a great rivalry going with BC too, and Labor Day with Saskatchewan and whatnot. And you're giving all that up.
The fans hated it that we were in the Eastern Conference. We'd build up these huge rivalries all the way through. I know as players, we thought the Eastern Conference was always the weakest conference, at least it had been for a number of years. And we thought, boy, if we go to the Eastern Conference, we're going to be in the Grey Cup every year.
And the Blue Bombers did win the Grey Cup in 1988, beating the BC Lions on a late interception and little else but the toe of Bob Cameron.
The 1988 game in Ottawa was a game that we won without any offense. We had one offensive running first down in the whole game. Completed 2 passes in the second half. Bob Cameron was sensational.
It was an extremely windy day. I fortunately had a pretty darn good game punting, and I guess it was a big factor in us winning the game. When you win by 1 point, then you can really look to the kicking game and